Thank you for tuning into this teaching. We hope this message blesses you. Our mission as Marigold Church is to do anything and everything so that anyone and everyone can encounter the real Jesus. We hope as you listen to this, you would encounter the real Jesus. Let him transform your mind, transform your heart, and encounter you today.
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and I am pastor of Marigold Church. Thank you so much for joining me and allowing me to be a part of your everyday life. Maybe you're going out for a walk and you've got us in your ears. Maybe you're sitting in the living room. Maybe you're on a car ride and you're just looking for some encouragement. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of that encouragement. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your everyday spiritual life. We are getting into week 3 of a series we are calling Question God. We think it's important to moving forward in a relationship with God that we ask God some serious questions. So week 1 was really an introduction and just kind of understanding the heart behind the message. We understand that the idea of questioning God for some can be like, wait a minute, that's just something you don't do. And so we wanted to understand this was not like a shock value type title or anything. It was really just that's what we want to do. We want to question God, but we wanted to understand, give you the heart behind it first. And I talked about my relationship with my dad and just how much it grew by asking him some tough questions. And I've moved that into my relationship with my heavenly dad, and it has grown me exponentially. And so then week 2, we had 2 parts. The first part was, why me? So many times we have asked that question, why me? Well, we think it's important to ask God the question. If anyone will have the answer of why you're going through what you're going through, maybe why he picked you to go through what you're going through, or to take on the task that he's taken you, ask you to take on. Ask God, why me? And don't be afraid of the answer. And God, the thing is, he will answer you. It may be the beginning of a journey. It may be that he responds to you with yet another question. But what's important is that you're going to have this growing dialogue with the Father. Part 2 of last week was, why not me? So many times we are on the other end of it when we're seeing people around us that are prospering, and maybe we feel like, hey, they don't deserve it, or they don't even like God. They don't love God. They don't serve God. They're maybe bold and emboldened in their walk against God, or just how much they despise the name of God, or are bitter towards him, or whatever it may be. And yet it seems like they are being blessed. And we looked at a man who was a musician, and not only that, but a worship musician over God's people, Asaph, and just how he felt that way, and just kind of going through that journey, as Asaph wrote about this in the Psalms. He wrote about a dozen of the Psalms, and so we read one of his Psalms, Psalm 73, and we just really believe in following it and looking at his life. I think he set a great example of how we can go about questioning God in that area when we're saying, hey, everyone else is being blessed, why not me? Today, we're kind of going to change gears a little bit, or just go into a different question, and this is the question. We got a good one here, and we think this is going to bless you, especially if you feel like you're in the midst of kind of a battle, or you're in the midst of, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? Why isn't this working out for me? Hey, God, I think I'm trying to follow you with all my heart. Why is this not working out? Or maybe you feel like you're in this valley area. You've come from a high place, and you're looking to go to another high place, but you're in this valley place, and you're wondering, what am I doing here? And the question is, am I a failure? This is a very personal question for me. It's one that I've asked God many, many times. And I'm not saying that I've just asked him, am I failing? Am I not doing this right? It was much deeper. It was, am I a failure? Is this who I am? Am I going from one battle after another, or one disappointment after another, because that's just who I am? I'm just a disappointment. I'm just a failure. Am I a failure? You might be thinking that in just through the circumstances you're going through. Maybe you got laid off and you're looking at your life and you're like, man, I'm having to cut back. I'm not able to give to my kids the way I thought I could give. I thought I was going to give them a better life than what I had. I thought I would be able to give them better possessions and those things. And I see I'm coming short. Am I a failure as a dad? Am I a failure as a mother? Man, I seem like I can't get along with my parents. I'm going through things and we just can't ever get on the same page, and we're going through things and it just seems like there's turmoil in the family. Am I a failure as a son? Am I a failure as a daughter? Am I a failure as a worker, as an employee? Am I a failure as an employer? I've had to lay people off through this entire COVID-19 and all these setbacks. Am I a failure as a business owner? Am I a failure in starting a business? Because here I started a business in the middle of COVID-19 and it's failing. Am I a failure as a pastor? Because everything that I thought was going to be good in the year 2020 is not happening. Am I not hearing from God the way I thought I was? Am I a failure as a pastor, as a shepherd of God's people? Because no matter how hard I try, now they're not showing back up. I hear some churches are opening up and pastors may be asking, where are the people? Am I failing as a pastor? Am I failing? Am I a failure? And I think that's something that it's a fair question to ask, especially when we're in tough times and we really want to hear the heart of God. God, am I a failure because of all the things that I'm going through? And I want to look at this from a different perspective than maybe you've heard before. And I'm not saying I have any new revelation. I'm just saying that this is just from a different perspective than maybe you've heard before. You see, years ago, I was at a crossroads. I owned a roofing company, but I was very involved in ministry. And it seemed like the better my company would do, it was a small business, but the better it would do, the less of the ministry side that I could do. And I loved doing ministry. In fact, my heart behind starting the business was not to make a lot of money. It was to be in charge of my schedule and owning my own business and being able to have the clients that I had. They were really good clients, and they gave me a steady stream of contracts and work, and so I was able to please them and do the contracts to the best of my ability and make sure they were happy. But at the same time, I was very upfront on days that I would not be working, or different times around Easter or Christmas or other charity events that we would do. And so here I was. I'd started the business, and it was doing really well. But then the ministry would suffer, and it would kind of be like, well, wait a minute. It seems like these things are against each other, but one is actually supporting the other. And I was a little bit confused on it, and I was like, well, God, if I just went and just stuck with the business, I feel like I'm too scattered, and I need more just to be very just drive one home. Maybe if I just forgot about the business, I went ahead and worked for someone, then I would be able to do more ministry. But then I wouldn't be in charge of my schedule, so it'd be kind of hard to do more ministry. Because, I had kids and a family and everything, and it wasn't that I could just peel myself away that easily. So I was really having a hard time, and I was really praying about it because it really bothered me. It really bothered me that I was being pulled in these two seeming opposing directions. And then what really brought it to a head was I was at this crossroads where I was ready to take on some bigger projects. But that meant pulling a lot away from ministry. And I began to kind of justify it, saying, well, I'll be making more money, So maybe I can't give the time to the ministry, but maybe I'll make up for it by giving the money to the ministry. And that's the way I did it for a while. Hey, I couldn't be there, but hey, I'll pay for some people to be there. I'll give in a way that that maybe it'll help this thing go forward. And at the time I was in youth ministry and children's ministry, and hey, I couldn't be there, but hey, I'll buy the snacks and the drinks and the pizza party and the prizes and everything for the youth group or for the children's meeting or whatever it was. But there was just something missing, because there was a gift in me that was missing and not being there. And that's not to glorify, that I was the greatest youth pastor or children's pastor. That's not it. But there was a gift that God had put in me to give to others. And money can't buy that. And so I was still at this crossroads, and I had some projects waiting for me. And they were pretty much mine. All I had to do is say yes. And I was really praying about it. And God began to speak to me about success and about failure. And I'm going to share with you at the end of this message what he showed me. And I believe it's going to bless you. But let's kind of take it back a little bit. What is success, right? So if you assume that there is a success in life, then you have to assume that there is a failure, right? So to succeed is to not fail, or to fail is to not succeed, right? So they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. And, we do this all the time. So the other day, my daughter and I were watching a movie. And she says, hey, Dad, these are the good guys. And so my first question was, well, who are the bad guys? Right? If there's good guys, there must be bad guys, right? And so she's like, no, Dad, it's not kind of like that. They're all good. Well, I was like, well, then what's the story about if everybody's good? She said, oh, well, I guess this one is kind of the bad guy. And so then we were watching something a little bit further, and it was kind of a sequel, and she said, oh, well, these are the bad guys. And I said, well, who are the good guys? And she says, well, I guess these others are the good guys, but they're not really good. They're just less bad. And so we had this thing like, wait a minute, there's good or there's bad. And that's the way we kind of are with success and failure. You're either a success or you're a failure, or you either succeeding or you're failing. And that's just kind of our perspective, and that's how we jumble things up or separate things, however you want to look at that. But there's success and there's failure. But my question is this: who defines success? Because the person who defines success also defines failure. Just like the person who defines what is good will also define what is bad, right? Or the opposite. If you say something is bad, then that gives you this perspective of what is good, because you're judging what is bad based off what you believe is good. So we have to look at success and failure in this kind of, juxtaposition or opposite ends of the spectrum. One is success, one is failure. But who defines success? Think about it for a minute. When you think of success, how do you define success? Is it a definition that you came up on your own? Is it a definition that you got maybe from what your parents always told you was success? Did your parents say, hey, if you go to the right school, you go to the right college, you get the right job, you make the right money, you live in the right neighborhood, making the right amount of money with the right amount of, with the right spouse and the right amount of kids and the perfect, that's success. Is that your definition of success? And I'm not saying that is right or wrong. I'm just asking, is that your definition? And where did that definition come from? Who gave you that definition? We have something in America called the American dream, right? And that is our ideal success, our idea of success. That is an American idea of success. Who created that idea of success? And so we need to look at that. So before we can say, am I a failure? I have to know what success is. Because failure is to just the lack of success or to not succeed. To fail is to not succeed. But who defines what success is? Because whoever defines what success is also defines failure. So before I can ask, am I a failure, I got to know what success is. And this kind of, maybe you kind of will look at this story I'm going to share with you in the book of Matthew. There's a story that's actually in 3 different books of the Bible. It's in Matthew chapter 19, it's in Mark chapter 10, and it's in Luke chapter 18. And we're going to look at this. And when I began to look at this question, because we've started off with the questions. We didn't have the message and then, okay, this is the question. We started off with the question. And the question was, am I a failure? And I brought this one to the table because I really felt that's a question that I've asked so many times. So am I a failure? And when I thought of this, I thought of the story of the young rich man or the young rich ruler who goes to Jesus. And I'm going to pick it up and we're going to read the account in Matthew chapter 19, verse 16 and forward. And I'm actually going to read this one. I'm going to kind of change gears here a little bit and read this out of King James. A lot of times I'll read it out of the Amplified or New American Standard or NIV or whatever. But this one I'm going to read out of King James. So it'll sound a little different. I may actually sound intelligent. So here we go. Matthew chapter 19, verse 16. And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? And he said unto him, so Jesus said, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keeping the commandments. And so right there he says, keep the commandments. That's what it is. And the young man responds, and in verse 18 he saith unto him, which? In other words, which commandments? So is there a particular one? Is it all of them? Which commandments shall I abide by or follow? And Jesus said, thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. In verse 20, the young man saith unto him, all these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet? So this is a very interesting thing. So he asks a question, Jesus answers him, but he asks another question. So the young man has a question. He questions God. And this is what he asks. He says, what lack I yet? And in other words, he's saying, I've done all those things, Jesus, but I'm still lacking something. What am I lacking? He is bringing the question. He's bringing the idea that I've done all this, but what am I lacking? And Jesus said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Then Jesus said unto his disciples in verse 23, verily I say unto you that a rich man shall hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus is giving this kind of image, and that it's kind of a debate on the word camel. On one, there's kind of a debate on what the word camel is. That the right translation? Is that the right word? But either way, Jesus is talking about something big going into something little, and the unlikelihood of it. Because sometimes the word camel, right there, or that's translated as camel, can be a different word that's just translated as like a braided rope. But either way, if you took a needle and tried to put a braided rope in it, still very difficult, right? And so don't get caught up in that if you've ever heard in that. The idea is that it's difficult, not that it's impossible, and we'll see that here coming up. In verse 25 it says, when his disciples heard it, they were exceedingly amazed, saying, who then can be saved? But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And so I want to look at that. Now here is the young man, And in some places it says the young rich ruler, but either way, he was a young man that came and he asked God some questions. He had some questions for God. What do I have to do to inherit heaven? Jesus answers him, and then he says, I've done all those things, but I'm still lacking something. Jesus gives him an answer. This is very, very rare that Jesus didn't ask him something. He tells him something. So many times Jesus will actually ask a question in return instead of answering the question. But he answers this question, and the young man goes away and he's saddened. He's sorrowful at the answer because it's just so difficult. You see, this young man had success, but it caused him to come up empty. And I'm not saying that success is a bad thing. I'm not saying success is something that you shouldn't go for, or if winning and being excelling and promotion and getting more money, and those are not bad things in and of themselves. But if that is your source and that is the very thing that you're wrapped up in, and that is your success, it's going to come up empty the way it did with the young rich ruler. The young ruler, he came up empty. Let me tell you what the Lord shared with me years ago. When I was at this crossroads, I was praying about it and praying about it and praying about it. I didn't know what to do. And this is what he said. He said, just in prayer and this impression upon my heart, he said, the worst failure is to succeed at the wrong thing. To succeed at the wrong thing. The worst failure is to succeed at the wrong thing. You see, he didn't answer my question on should I go after those big projects and should I put away ministry. He didn't give me a direct answer. He gave me that idea. And with that, has guided so much of my decisions when it comes to my career, my family, my overall life. You see, I've decided to put what the definition of success is in God's hands. You see, when he tells me to do something and I do it, I'm successful at that. If I do something that's difficult for me, but it's something that God has put in my path, I am a success. If I fail at it by not doing the simplest thing that he has in my life, I failed. If I go and do something that's really, really good in my own eyes, but God said, that's not what I have for you, I have failed. Even though it may have benefited someone in the temporary time, I failed because I didn't do what God called me to do. So the ultimate success is to do what God has called you to do. What has God called you to do? If he's called you to create a big business, do it, but do it his way. Be obedient in that. If he's called you to do something small, then do that. Be obedient in that. And it may open the doors to something bigger, but the idea is you do what you know God has called you to do. And you know God has spoken to your heart. And whatever that is, do it. Because you can go after all these things and then come up empty. And you can be a success in your friend's eyes, in the world's eyes, in your family's eyes. And then come up empty and know that you failed. Are you a failure? Not if you're doing what God's calling you to do. And for some of you, this is an encouragement because God's called you to do things and go through things and they're difficult. And you're saying, God, this is hard. And I feel like I'm not making traction. And God's saying, just keep being obedient. That's the success. That's where success is. It's in the obedience to God. And for some of you, this may be a wake-up call. Because you know God's called you to do something. But instead, you've taken on your own path. You've sought after someone else's definition of success. And I know this is kind of sobering, But I want to take you to one more verse, and it's a short verse, and I'm going to close with this. It's found in Matthew chapter 7. And this is kind of at the tail end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is wrapping up the Sermon on the Mount, and he says this in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 23. And this one, I'm going to read out the Amplified. Jesus says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, and driven out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name?'" And Jesus says this in verse 23, "And then I will say to them openly and publicly, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who act wickedly, disregarding my commands.'" That is the ultimate failure, is to leave this earth and to stand before the Father, and even knowing you've done all these great things, and he looks at you and says, "You did all that, but I never knew you." You see, the greatest success that you'll ever have is your relationship with the Father. That comes through knowing the Son, Jesus. So I encourage you, if you have a twisted idea of what success is, if you have a worldly idea of what success is, if your idea of success is something opposite or opposing the Bible, I encourage you to seek after him and ask him the ultimate question. Am I failing? Am I a failure in this? I guarantee if you're seeking God and you're asking him the question, chances are you're on the right path. You see, that young man was on the right path. He asked the right questions. And yes, he went away disappointed, but we don't know if it ended that way for him. And I encourage you to ask God the question and seek his heart regarding success and failure. I guarantee when you get the Father's heart, you will not be disappointed.
Hey, if this message or any of the content that we've been putting out has blessed you and you're wondering how you can partner with us in generosity, there are a couple ways to do that. You can download the PushPay app and you can search Marigold Church and you can give that way. You could also set up recurring giving, and it's really user-friendly. It makes it really easy to give. You could also text Marigold to 77977 and give that way. We believe God moves through a generous heart, and so we would love to see what God does through you as you partner with us and as we walk through this journey together.